Decades, things like autism, ADHD, sensory issues, or even allergies have been on the rise. And we're asked, what is going on and what's the underlying root cause contributing to these different things? Why are we seeing such a noteworthy increase in these things? And so we really want to talk about what's called the central nervous system. Now, we talk about the central nervous system a lot because the central nervous system is the command center for the whole body. We have the brain, which turns into the brainstem, which turns into the spinal cord, and out of the spinal cord goes a nerve that goes to every cell, muscle, tissue, and organ in the body. And so from the brain through the nervous system, it controls everything. So if the nervous system is dysfunctional or there's an imbalance in the nervous system, it's going to impact everything downstream. And that's why we always come back to it as a vital or key point in achieving any goals that we're working on. That there are a lot of positive things we can work on down the road from that. But if the nervous system is dysregulated, then it's going to be very hard for us to really make noteworthy improvement in a lot of other areas. So we have the nervous system. That's what it is. And we have two branches. We have sympathetic, which is fight or flight, and parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. Sympathetic is the gas pedal. Parasympathetic is the brake. Now, inside the parasympathetic nervous system, we have what's called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is one of the commanding nerves that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is really important. It's a cranial nerve, which means it goes directly to the brain. And it's one of the longest nerves in the body, going all the way from the brain to the gut, going to things directly like the gut and the lungs. And so what happens is if we have dysregulation in the vagus nerve, then it's going to be difficult for us to really regulate that nervous system. And so it's a key point in what we're trying to stimulate when we're trying to regulate the nervous system as a whole. So what are some things that we can see if we have vagus nerve dysfunction? Well, we can see digestive problems, things like constipation, bloating, reflux. We can see respiratory issues like asthma or chronic cough. We can see immune dysregulation, things like allergies or autoimmune disorders. And we can see mood imbalances like anxiety or depression. And we can also see sensory processing difficulties. All of these can be linked to vagus nerve dysfunction. Now, what causes vagus nerve disruption or dysfunction? Well, this goes back to what we call the perfect storm, which is a combination of stress and the fact that we are inundated with more stressors than ever before. And so we're constantly being stimulated. So we have environmental stress, which can be chronic antibiotics, medications, substance exposure in utero, environmental exposure. Our body is filtering these things out, and it has a liver and kidneys in order to do so, even skin. But at some point, that does accumulate stress in the body. So what is our exposure to these environmental things? The second thing we have is we have mental and emotional stress. We're seeing a lot of mental and emotional stress, especially coming out of COVID and seeing heightened maternal mental and emotional stress during the prenatal period, and how maternal cortisol, which is the stress hormone, gets passed down to baby and impacts baby. So we're seeing maternal stress rates are higher than ever, and therefore we're also seeing kids' stress rates are higher than ever. And that has a lot to do with just the amount of stimuli that we're exposing them to, in addition to a lot of the other things that culminate to increase mental and emotional stress in kids. So we have environmental stress, mental and emotional stress, and then physical stress. Physical stress can be anything from slips, falls, accidents, especially when they're toddlers, that happens all the time. Or it can be something more serious like birth trauma or birth interventions. Ultimately, our goal is a happy, healthy baby, but the more interventions, the more traumatic or the more stressful it can be on baby's body. And so that's physical stress, especially when we're talking about the vagus nerve. The degree of birth interventions and the severity can definitely also physically damage the vagus nerve. So we're talking about dysfunction in nervous system dysfunction, but also potentially some physical damage as well. Now, so those are some of the things that you can you can look to say, is there potentially some underlying vagus nerve dysfunction? Now, there's a lot of things you can do to help stimulate the vagus nerve. Things like gargling or humming, cold water exposure, etc. But what's so cool about nervous system based chiropractic care is it actually is shown in research that when you get adjusted, it actually lights up your brain. And so it's going directly to the brain. And so there's a lot of great techniques, but in something that is quick and easy and something especially for kids, we're talking about depending on potentially if there's special needs or just age development wise, it may be very difficult to say, hey, let's do a meditation. Or, hey, let's do cold water exposure, or hum, or even learn how to take diaphragmatic breathing, deep belly breaths, and learn how to diaphragmatically breathe. That may just be very difficult, especially if we're working maybe with a 3-year-old, or maybe even younger, 2-year-old. And so what's so cool about chiropractic is it's something that we're able to do, and it's something that's quick, kids will love it, and then it also really directly stimulates the brain. And so we know we're making an impact. And so it's really cool to see how we can do that. One of the ways we can measure nervous system dysregulation in kiddos and in adults is through our scans we utilize here in our office. One of them being your HRV, or your adaptability to stress. So we can measure where you're at now, how your nervous system is regulating, and how we're making progress through chiropractic care. So if you want to see how your nervous system is doing and if your nervous system is regulated, you can go ahead and check out sunlifechiropractic.com.